Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Clattered against the keyboard, a man hunched over his computer, brow furrowed in concentration as he typed out yet another email. To whom it may concern, I've been trying to access your website for hours now, and I'm at my wit's end. What kind of incompetent operation are you running? I'm a paying customer, and I demand better service. Fix this issue immediately, or I'll take my business elsewhere. Sincerely, Al. He hit send with a forceful click, leaning back in his chair with a huff. The computer screen glowed softly, illuminating his frustrated features. Minutes ticked by, but no response came. Growling under his breath, he leaned forward once more, fingers flying across the keys. It's been 30 minutes since my last email. Your silence is unacceptable. Do you have any idea how much time I've wasted trying to access your site? I have important things to do, and you're holding me back. Get it together, else. He paced the room, running his hands through his disheveled hair. The walls seemed to close in around him as he waited for a response that never came. Hours passed, and his anger gave way to desperation. Please, I'm begging you. I need to access the site. It's consuming my every thought. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Just let me in. I'll do anything. Allow. Days blurred together as he sat glued to his screen, refreshing the page over and over. His appearance grew unkempt, stubble darkening his jaw. Empty coffee mugs and takeout containers littered the desk. I don't know who I am anymore. Your website has taken over my life. I'm losing touch with reality. Is this what you wanted? To drive your users to madness? Alan! He tried to break free, to step away from the computer. But like a moth drawn to a flame, he always returned, drawn by an inexplicable pull. I thought I could quit you. I really did. I went for a walk, tried to reconnect with nature. But here I am, back at my desk, writing another email. What have you done to me? Alan. Weeks passed, and a change began to take root. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, no longer recognizing the person staring back. I've had an epiphany. Your website. It's opened my eyes to something I've been repressing for years. I'm not who I thought I was. The content I've seen, it's awakened something in me. Ellen. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Long hair replaced the short crop, makeup appeared on the vanity. Dresses hung in the closet where suits once resided. I'm undergoing gender reassignment. Your website showed me who I truly am, but I can't help feeling conflicted. The very thing that led me to this realization now disgusts me. I'm torn between gratitude and revulsion. Ellen. Months passed, and Ellen emerged, butterfly-like, into a new life. She stood before the computer one last time, fingers hovering over the keys. This is my final email. I'm saying goodbye to your website and the person I used to be. Thank you for showing me the truth about myself, but I can no longer support what you represent. I hope others find their way as I have. Farewell, Ellen. With a decisive click, she shut down the computer and turned away. The room that had been her prison now felt open and full of possibility. Ellen stepped out into the sunshine, ready to embrace her new life, leaving behind the dark days of obsession and confusion. As she walked down the street, heads turned to admire her confident stride. Her floral sundress swayed in the breeze, a far cry from the rumpled shirts and sweatpants of her past. She smiled at passers-by, reveling in the feeling of finally being comfortable in her own skin. Ellen's phone buzzed in her purse. For a moment, old habits threatened to resurface as she wondered if it might be a response from the website. But she shook off the thought, reminding herself that chapter of her life was closed. Instead, she found a message from her therapist, confirming their appointment for the following day. Ellen smiled, grateful for the support system she'd built during her transition. She made her way to a nearby cafe, ordering a latte and settling into a cozy corner booth. As she sipped her coffee, she pulled out a journal, ready to reflect on her journey. Dear Diary, she began, then paused, chuckling softly at how cliché it sounded. But she continued anyway, letting the words flow onto the page. It's been a year since I sent that first angry email. I never could have imagined where that frustration would lead me. Looking back, I can see how lost and confused I was, how I projected all my inner turmoil onto that website. She paused, taking another sip of her latte as she gathered her thoughts. I was so angry, so desperate to access something I thought would fill the void inside me. But the truth is, what I was really seeking was myself. The website was just a catalyst, a mirror that forced me to confront the person I'd been hiding from for so long. The cafe bustled around her, the chatter of patrons and the hiss of espresso machines creating a soothing background noise. Ellen felt at peace, no longer consumed by the need to constantly check her inbox or refresh a web page. The journey hasn't been easy, she continued writing. There were days when I wanted to give up, to crawl back into the safety of my old identity. But every step forward, every small victory reminded me that I was on the right path. She glanced up, catching her reflection in the cafe window. A woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile looked back at her. It still amazed her sometimes, seeing herself as she truly was. I'm not angry anymore, she wrote. Not at the website, not at myself. I've learned to embrace the twists and turns that led me here. Without that initial frustration, without the obsession that followed, I might never have found the courage to be true to myself. As she wrote, memories of her transformation flowed through her mind. The first time she tried on a dress, nervously purchasing makeup at the drugstore, the day she chose her new name. Each step had been terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I remember the day I finally decided to delete my account on that website, Ellen wrote. It felt like cutting the last tie to my old self. But it was also liberating, like I was finally free to move forward without looking back. She set down her pen, flexing her fingers. The journal was becoming a cherished record of her journey, a testament to how far she'd come. A group of women at a nearby table caught her attention. They were laughing, sharing stories over their lunch. Ellen felt a pang of longing, realizing how isolated she'd been during her transition. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her courage. Excuse me, she said, approaching their table with a smile. I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. Would you mind if I joined you? To her relief, the women welcomed her warmly, pulling up an extra chair. As she sat down, introducing herself, Ellen felt a warmth spreading through her chest. This was what she'd been missing, genuine human connection. Hours passed as they chatted, sharing laughter and swapping stories. Ellen found herself opening up, sharing bits and pieces of her journey. To her surprise and joy, the women were supportive and curious, asking thoughtful questions and offering words of encouragement. As the afternoon wore on, they exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet again. Ellen left the cafe with a spring in her step, feeling like she'd finally found her place in the world. Back home, she settled onto her couch, picking up her journal once more. I made friends today, she wrote, a smile playing on her lips. Real friends, not usernames on a screen. It's amazing how much richer life becomes when you step away from the computer and engage with the world around you. She thought back to the days when her entire existence had revolved around that website, how small her world had become. I used to think that website held all the answers, she mused on paper. But the truth is, the answers were inside me all along. I just needed to find the courage to look for them. As evening fell, Ellen prepared for bed, her nightly routine a far cry from the sleepless nights spent hunched over a keyboard. She applied her favorite lavender-scented moisturizer, brushed out her long hair, and slipped into a silky nightgown. Settling under the covers, she picked up a book from her nightstand, a far healthier bedtime habit than refreshing web pages until the early hours of the morning. But before she began reading, she had one last thought to jot down in her journal. Tomorrow is a new day, she wrote. A day full of possibilities, free from the chains of my past obsessions. I'm excited to see where this journey takes me next. With that, Ellen closed her journal, turned off the light, and drifted off to sleep, looking forward to the adventures that awaited her in the morning. The next day dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the curtains Ellen had forgotten to close. She stretched languidly, relishing the feeling of a good night's sleep, something that had eluded her for so long during her days of internet addiction. As she went about her morning routine, Ellen couldn't help but reflect on how different her life had become. The constant anxiety, the desperate need to check her emails and refresh web pages had been replaced by a sense of calm and purpose. She brewed a cup of herbal tea, settling at her kitchen table to plan her day. Her calendar, once empty save for reminders to check the website, was now filled with appointments, social engagements, and self-care activities. Today's schedule included a therapy session, a yoga class, and coffee with one of the women she'd met at the cafe. Ellen smiled, thinking about how her world had expanded beyond the confines of her computer screen. As she sipped her tea, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her new friend, confirming their coffee date. Ellen felt a flutter of excitement. Genuine human interaction still felt novel and thrilling after so long in isolation. She dressed carefully for her day, choosing a flowing blouse in a soft shade of blue and comfortable slacks. As she applied her makeup, she marveled at how much more confident she felt in her appearance. Gone were the days of hiding behind a screen name and avatar. The therapy session was challenging but rewarding. Ellen discussed her progress, her fears, and her hopes for the future. Her therapist praised her growth, reminding her of how far she'd come since their first session. "You've made remarkable progress, Ellen," the therapist said, her voice warm with pride. "How do you feel about your journey so far?" Ellen paused, considering the question. "It's been hard," she admitted. "There are still days when I feel lost or uncertain. But overall, I feel free, like I'm finally living authentically." The therapist nodded encouragingly. "That's wonderful to hear. And how are you dealing with triggers? Do you still feel the urge to return to old habits?" Ellen took a deep breath. "Sometimes," she said softly, "especially when I'm feeling stressed or lonely. But I'm getting better at recognizing those feelings and finding healthier ways to cope." They discussed strategies for managing these moments, with the therapist suggesting journaling, meditation, and reaching out to friends as alternatives to falling back into old patterns. As the session ended, Ellen felt a renewed sense of purpose. She headed to her yoga class, ready to connect with her body and clear her mind. The studio was peaceful, filled with the soft scent of incense and the gentle sound of meditative music. Ellen unrolled her mat, settling into a comfortable position as the instructor began the class. As she moved through the poses, Ellen focused on her breath, letting go of the lingering anxiety from discussing her past in therapy. With each stretch and bend, she felt more grounded, more present in her body. The instructor's soothing voice guided them through the final relaxation. "Let go of what no longer serves you," she intoned. "Embrace the present moment and the beautiful future that awaits." Ellen felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, moved by the simple truth of those words. She had let go of so much, her old identity, her obsessions, her fears. And in doing so, she'd made room for a life filled with joy and authenticity. After class, she headed to the cafe to meet her new friend. The woman waved enthusiastically as Ellen entered, already seated at a cozy table by the window. "Ellen, it's so good to see you," she greeted warmly. "How has your day been?" As they chatted over lattes and pastries, Ellen felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This simple act of friendship, of sharing stories and laughter, was something she'd been missing for so long. "You know," Ellen said during a lull in the conversation, "I used to spend all my time online, convinced that was where I'd find connection. But sitting here with you, I realize how wrong I was. This real, human interaction is what I was looking for all along." Her friend reached across the table, squeezing her hand gently. "I'm so glad you found your way here, Ellen. You're an incredible woman, and I'm honored to call you my friend." As the afternoon wore on, they made plans to attend a local art exhibition the following weekend. Ellen left the cafe feeling buoyant, excited about the future in a way she hadn't been in years. Back home, she settled into her favorite armchair, pulling out her journal once more. As she began to write about her day, she realized something profound. "I haven't thought about that website once today," she wrote, her pen flying across the page. "Not once did I feel the urge to check my old email or log in. It's like that part of my life is truly behind me now." She paused, tapping the pen against her chin as she considered her next words. "I'm grateful for the journey that brought me here, even the painful parts. Without that initial frustration, without the obsession that followed, I might never have found the courage to become who I truly am. But I'm even more grateful that I found the strength to move beyond it, to create a life filled with real connections and genuine joy." As she closed her journal, Ellen felt a sense of peace settle over her. The angry, frustrated person who had fired off that first email seemed like a distant memory. In her place was a woman who had faced her demons, embraced her true self, and emerged stronger for it. She glanced at her computer, gathering dust in the corner of the room. For a moment, she considered turning it on, checking to see if there were any lingering messages from her past life, but the urge passed quickly, replaced by a quiet certainty. That chapter was closed. Her story was still being written, but on pages of real-life experiences, not in the glow of a computer screen. Ellen smiled, ready to see what the next page would bring. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through her windows, Ellen decided to take a walk. The evening air was crisp and invigorating, a stark contrast to the stuffy atmosphere of her old, computer-filled days. She strolled through the neighborhood, admiring the blooming flowers in front yards and the cheerful chatter of families enjoying dinner on their porches. It struck her how much she'd missed by isolating herself for so long. A group of children rode by on bicycles, their laughter carried on the breeze. Ellen smiled, remembering her own carefree childhood days before the internet had become such a dominant force in her life. As she walked, she began to plan for her future. Perhaps she could volunteer at a local shelter or take an art class. The possibilities seemed endless now that she wasn't tethered to a screen. Returning home, Ellen felt a sense of contentment wash over her. She prepared a simple dinner, savoring the act of cooking for herself, another habit she'd neglected during her days of takeout and endless scrolling. After dinner, she settled onto her balcony with a book, enjoying the peaceful evening. The distant sound of traffic and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog created a soothing urban lullaby. As she read, Ellen found herself fully immersed in the story, no longer distracted by the constant urge to check her phone or refresh a web page. It was a small pleasure, but one that brought her immense joy. Before bed, she took a moment to update her journal one last time. "Today was ordinary in the best possible way," she wrote. "No drama, no crises, just a day filled with simple pleasures and genuine interactions." A year ago, I would have considered such a day boring, not worth logging off for. Now I understand that these ordinary days are what make life truly extraordinary. She paused, tapping her pen against the page as she considered her next words. "I used to think I needed that website to feel complete, to understand myself. But the truth is, it was holding me back from truly living. By letting go of that virtual world, I have been able to fully embrace the real one, with all its challenges and joys." Ellen closed her journal, feeling a sense of closure. The angry emails, the desperate pleas, the confusion and frustration, all of it had led her here, to this moment of peace and self-acceptance. As she prepared for bed, Ellen caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was strong, confident, and at peace with herself. She smiled, grateful for the journey that had brought her to this point. Settling into bed, Ellen felt a sense of excitement for what tomorrow might bring. No longer bound by the chains of addiction and confusion, she was free to explore, to grow, to live authentically. She drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled not with flashing screens and urgent notifications, but with the promise of new adventures and genuine connections. In the weeks and months that followed, Ellen continued to flourish. She threw herself into her new life with enthusiasm, exploring interests and passions she'd neglected for far too long. She joined a local book club, relishing the lively discussions about literature that went far beyond the shallow interactions she'd experienced online. The members quickly became close friends, and their monthly meetings became a highlight of Ellen's social calendar. Inspired by her therapy sessions, Ellen decided to start a support group for others struggling with internet addiction and gender identity issues. It was challenging at first, opening up about her experiences to strangers, but the sense of community and shared understanding that developed was invaluable. As she listened to others share their stories, Ellen realized how common her struggles had been. Many in the group spoke of feeling lost, of using the internet as an escape from confronting their true selves. Together, they worked on strategies for building healthier relationships with technology and embracing their authentic identities. Ellen's confidence grew with each passing day. She started taking dance classes, rediscovering the joy of movement and expression through her body. The studio became another safe space where she could let go of her worries and simply be present in the moment. Her relationships deepened and expanded. The women from the cafe became a tight-knit group of friends, supporting each other through life's ups and downs. Ellen found herself hosting dinner parties, something she would never have considered in her previous life. As she chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, chatting and laughing with her friends, Ellen marveled at how far she'd come. The kitchen, once a neglected space in her apartment, was now filled with warmth and the delicious aromas of home-cooked meals. One evening, as she was preparing for one such dinner party, Ellen's phone buzzed with a notification. For a brief moment, old habits surfaced, and she felt a flutter of anxiety. But as she glanced at the screen, she saw it was simply a reminder for an upcoming art exhibition she'd planned to attend. She chuckled softly, shaking her head at her momentary lapse. It was a reminder of how ingrained her old behaviors had been, but also of how far she'd come in overcoming them. As her friends arrived, bearing bottles of wine and warm hugs, Ellen felt a surge of gratitude. This was the connection she'd been searching for all along, real, tangible, and infinitely more satisfying than any online interaction could ever be. The night was filled with laughter, deep conversations, and the simple joy of shared company. As the last guest left, Ellen began to tidy up, humming softly to herself. She paused by the window, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of peace. The angry, frustrated person who had fired off that first email seemed like a stranger now. In her place stood a woman who had faced her demons, embraced her true self, and created a life filled with meaning and joy. Ellen knew there would still be challenges ahead. The journey of self-discovery and growth was never truly over. But she faced the future with confidence and optimism, knowing she had the strength and support to handle whatever came her way. As she got ready for bed that night, Ellen took a moment to write in her journal one last time. "Today, I realized something important," she wrote. "That website, which once seemed so crucial to my existence, was never the answer. It was a distraction, a place to hide from the truth about myself. The real journey began the day I stepped away from the screen and into the world." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.